Yeah, you better play that music for a while. Thank you. My name's Tom. I'm addict. I told her she needed to play the music a little longer because I'm a little slower than I was when I first got clean. Thanks for the share. I really enjoyed it. It's always hard to go first. I could get a little resentment here if I wanted because, Tommy's speaking in the first step in the big room over there, and he was laughing because I got the small room. So we'll let it go at that. My clean date's August 1st of 1988. And, I say that not to brag or to, get anything that I don't have coming to me, but I say that because I've both worked this step to a great part of my ability, and I've not worked this step to a great part of my ability. But the thing that I know for sure is that you can still stay clean if you don't use. And, I was sitting out there and I was thinking what there's basically two parts to this step because it talks about, we have this spiritual experience and then we share it with other addicts. And then the second part is, in the first part it says we try to do that, right? And there's a couple people in here that know me. I hate the fucking word try, right? Because try was always my mantra for why I didn't get something done. I did a lot of whining about trying, after I failed to do something because I didn't do anything, and then I would whine about trying, how hard I tried, when in all reality I didn't try at all. But for this particular step, it actually works because the trying's not from my effort, right? It's from the reception of the message from the addict, right? I still work hard to do it, but whether or not they get it is like, she said before me, is on them, right? It's not my responsibility for somebody to get it. And I always think back to in one of the traditions, I can't ever remember. I used to remember all this stuff, but as I've gotten older, it all kind of runs together, right? So I'll probably miss stuff. There's somebody sitting back here that knows something about me from years ago at Cabin Fever where I did a really bad thing at like midnight, and I never fucking heard the end of it, right? I still hear about it. So, and that's been quite a while. But it talks about how an addict will get this when he or she is ready, right? And it doesn't matter how much I try to beat it into them, how much I try to wish for them, pray for them, try to help them, reach out to them. They're going to get it when they're going to get it, right? And when I first got clean, I'm not going to qualify myself a lot in my addiction, but one thing I'll tell you is my first experience with recovery was from a cousin. My mom, God bless her, I was the youngest of three, mama's boy, right? My mom would have gone to the ends of the earth to have me not be the way I was, right? And so I had a cousin that was in recovery at that time in '85, and I was living in a house with an old heroin addict that was my sister's friend, who was like 10 years older than me, and he was really bad, and he wanted me out of his house, right? Because I was even worse. He maintained a job and stuff, but I just couldn't do anything. So he really wanted me out, so I didn't know what to do. So, of course, I called Mommy, right? And I said, what do I do? Well, she knew my cousin Dennis was in recovery, and he came out to attempt to carry the message to me, okay? Somebody that was not ready to hear the message. The only thing I was actually ready to do was to try to con him out of a few bucks for a pack of smokes and something to eat. Right? So I listened to his little spiel and then hit him up for he's like, hey, you want to go to a meeting? Yeah. But give me, he gave me $5 or whatever. But it did plant the seed a little bit because I knew he had been bad, and it planted the seed in me a little bit. And, 3 years later, I was ready. I was ready to be clean. And, I came into I went into a Salvation Army detox and spent the next 14 months living at that Salvation Army, right? And walking to meetings, hearing the message. I remember when I got my first sponsor, I waited a while, because I wasn't one of those people that's going to jump right into this. I waited a little while and got my first sponsor. We started working steps. And I remember the first guy that I attempted to help, right? He he got clean. He was getting clean, and we were doing stuff, and we became friends. We had a lot of common interests and stuff. And he stayed clean for about a year, and he relapsed, and it just about crushed me, because I thought somehow that I had failed him. And it talks about in this step, I believe in that it works on why, how there is no such thing as a failed 12-step, right? Because what I know, looking back, is that I stayed clean during that period because I was doing what I was supposed to do. Whether or not he stayed clean was no reflection on me. Some of these guys, I sponsor a few guys, and for whatever reason, I draw the ruffians, I don't know what it is. I don't have any tattoos. I've never been to prison. We go out and eat and stuff. I feel like I'm in an episode of Love After Lockup or something, And I would say it if they were here, too. They don't give a shit. They think it's funny, But I tend to draw the hard cases for somehow, and as you talked about, there's a lot of different ways to carry the message. If Dwayne was in here, Dwayne's the hugging one of our guys, he's a hugger and love you till tomorrow and all this other stuff. And I'm more of a kick you in the seat of the pants guy, so it does take all kinds, and there's a lot of different ways to carry the message. But with the spiritual experience that I've had through this, and it talks about this, if you read the 12-step, it talks about how each step helps us with this spiritual experience, And the thing is that my message and the way I carry it has changed throughout the course that I've been clean. When I first got clean, and it's funny as addicts, and there's a whole range of clean times in here, and maybe maybe you can relate to this, maybe you can't. But when I first got clean in Kansas, I live just west of Kansas City. So when I first got clean there, somebody had 2 or 3, 4 years. They were like a god, right? It was like, oh my God, you got 4 years clean. How do you do that? And I asked the first guy to sponsor me because I thought he was cool, and I thought he was cool, and I was so cool that I needed a cool sponsor. But in all reality, he wasn't doing any of the second part of the 12th step. He was living in all of his character defects. He had multiple flaws. He was involved in all kinds of things he shouldn't have been involved in. And needless to say, he ended up using me behind it. But when we first get clean, at least for me, I placed all this emphasis on clean time. People that have been clean for a while were these walking gurus. And I believed that for a while. And then at about 2 or 3 years clean, I started thinking everybody that didn't think like me was full of shit, right? And that I was the only one that really had the answers. And I would go into group consciences and stuff, and beat my hands on the table and tell them that it needed to be a certain way. And if we make it through that and we get past that, we start to realize that that's not really the way that I need to carry the message, right? And that I can carry it through all of these different things. But it talks about throughout each one of those steps, in the 12th step, it talks about how we need to carry ourselves with humility. And I never really understood what humility. The speaker last night talked about dictionaries, and I spent a lot of time looking words up in dictionaries because I didn't really understand what they meant. And when they talk about humility, you can hear different things, but it talks about, as addicts, it's real hard for us to be proud of our accomplishments without being braggarts, right? Or being, and a lot of times, there's a lot of emphasis almost that when somebody talks about their accomplishments being clean, they're somehow not humble, right? So as with everything else in my life, it's always a freaking balancing act, I can talk about my life and how it's changed since I've been clean, but if I talk too much about it, I become egotistical, which, has been an issue in my life also. And when I talk about that, the humility that's found in this step, it has allowed me, it's changed because I used to probably, you spoke a little bit about being an NA Nazi. I've probably been accused of that more than once, different things. We started a group up about 3 years ago in Kansas City. It's literature-based. It's what we talk about. It's one night a week, and it can be a little much for some people sometimes, right? But it's all meant to be it's all meant to be geared towards the literature, because if I'm a firm believer that if I can find it in the literature, it's not my opinion, right? And that's where I struggle sometimes carrying the message, and I struggled before because I would be opinion-based more than literature-based, and it's not my opinion if it's in there, and we can interpret it a little bit different. But what I found through those steps and find that that spirituality, I didn't have anything. I was based. The literature talks about us this being a disease of self-centeredness, and it's funny because when we first come in here, we really don't understand that. We just know that we're using drugs, our life's jacked up, and we want something different. But we don't understand the whole aspect of the obsessiveness of my disease and the fact that I'm self-centered. When I used, I didn't think about anybody else, right? Nobody else. If I thought about you, it was because there was something in the bag for me, whether it be money, sex, a place to live, or anything else. There was always something in it for me. I never did anything without strings. And it's funny because when I was using, I would help people out, but there was always something in it for me. And going through the steps, especially when you get through it talks about in the steps going through the third step and the fifth. There's Dwayne if you want a hug right there. So Dwayne doesn't even need a hugging shirt. He likes hugging everybody. So, especially you. But as it goes through, I realize that this is where I need to. When I share this message and I go out and I try to help people, I'm getting out of self. And if I get out of self consistently, then I'm not thinking about myself. And it's funny. Steve and I took a H&I meeting to the Kansas Penitentiary for I don't know how many years. I mean, it goes back and forth. I'm not very good at judging years. I used to give him shit all the time about how he was 20 years clean and still living in his brother's basement. But in all reality, it was only like 5. So, but it just whatever suits me best when I'm giving him shit. But we took a meeting to the Kansas State Penitentiary for a long time. And I'll back this up. My first exposure to H&I, I was clean for H&I I don't know how it is in this area. In Kansas City, it used to be a little different. Basically, H&I was if you showed up early for a meeting and somebody was doing H&I, they would grab you and say, hey, you're doing H&I tonight, right? It really wasn't a, hey, do you want to do H&I? It was like, hey, if you want to stay clean, this is what you're going to fucking do, right? And my first exposure to H&I had, I don't know, 6 or 7 months clean, maybe less. And I was going to a group up in Kansas City, Kansas, and there was an old guy there that had been clean for, seemed like 40 years, but it was probably like 3. And he told me, he said, hey, man, he said, you need to do H&I. We're going to do H&I tonight. I mean, he didn't even tell me where it was at. So he drugged me up to the Leavenworth military prison in Leavenworth, right? And this, here I am, I'm 24, 25 years old, young kid, never been in prison, right? I'm walking in there, and we walk in, and there's like 300 convicts in this room, right, with one gunnery sergeant. And I'm thinking, holy shit, man. The old freaking penitentiary had been built in the 1850s, and I'm in there, and I'm going, holy shit, I'm scared to shit, right? I had no idea. And the thing is what you had to do, what they made you do the first day you were there was you had to get up in front of all of them and qualify yourself, right? And I'm standing up there going, duh, duh. These guys had been, hacked off people's heads in foreign countries and got caught with, smuggling tens of millions of dollars worth of dope and stuff. And, afterwards they all came up and they were appreciative that I was there because they wanted to hear some message of recovery, even that small amount that I had. So, like she said before me, even if you have a day clean, you have something to offer. And the thing is sometimes the newer people have a purer message than those of us that have become jaded and, disenfranchised or whatever, Nazi-like, whatever. I don't give a shit. Somebody made a meme. I'd show it, but it's kind of offensive. But sometimes they carry a purer message than those of us. Dwayne sponsors a guy, actually, it's got a couple of years clean, that he carries a great message of Narcotics Anonymous because it's still fresh and new to him sometimes. And I think that's important. But, on to our H&I. Steve and I did the prison up there on Sunday nights for several years. And we did it right up until COVID hit. And then they kind of kicked us all out. But the thing is I looked forward to that every Sunday night. And we did it for years, man. I can't remember how many years I did it, but we did it for a long time. And I looked forward to that every Sunday night. And the guys looked forward to it, right? Because people were coming in and bringing a message of recovery. They really looked forward to it. And it was good for me because the thing I knew, no matter what was going on, my wife was being angry at maybe, and it wasn't my fault, right? But she was being mean to me for whatever reason. On a Sunday night, and I was feeling down, my job wasn't, I was mad at the dog or whatever, and I would go in there in the freedom of walking out, knowing that no matter what screwed up thing I had going on in my life, there wasn't a guy in there that wouldn't trade places with me like that, right? Because, and the thing that I came to realize in there, we had guys, I think we had a guy that was an RSR in there at one time, right? And he'd gotten clean, which kind of going to lead me into the second part of this. He'd gotten clean and stayed clean for a period of time, and then for whatever reason decided that his life was more important than Narcotics Anonymous. And, got caught up in all of that, and he found himself at 3 or 4 years clean, 5 years clean, using again, and then ended up back in prison, right? That was a great thing for me. And I never... I've always been one. I do more anonymous type service. I've never been a regional this, regional that. That's just not my bag because I struggle with ego and arrogance sometimes. Right? It's kind of goes with my job and everything else, and so that's probably not a good place for me to flourish sometimes. And I struggle playing nice with others when I feel things are kind of stupid. So, I made it to, I was the area treasurer for 2 months, and then decided that probably wasn't for me at one point. And I will limit myself to H&I and sponsoring some guys and helping a newcomer. The one thing I do know is that if I'm not being asked to be a sponsor occasionally, and I don't go to near the meetings that I used to go, I go to my Tuesday night meeting religiously. Never miss it. Sorry, I said religion. Oh my God, crucify me. What Nazi would say something like that? I go there every Tuesday. I don't miss. It's important to me. I think a lot of times the message is carried by consistency, and guys know that they can find me there. I'm there every week. I travel a little bit for work throughout Kansas City and Topeka, so I'll hit a noon meet in various places and share my my glowing personality with them from time to time. But that's pretty much what I do. So it kind of leads me into the second part of this. So while the first part says we try to carry this message, the second part doesn't say anything about try, right? It says we practice these principles in all of our affairs, right? And that doesn't just mean in here, right? There's this is a big convention, and there's a lot of people that come here. There's a lot of people that come here and they just go to conventions, right? They don't have a home group. They don't sponsor guys. There's a lot of guys who've been clean for a long time. I know them. They're my peers or guys I've known for a long time in Kansas City that won't sponsor a newcomer, right? They don't make themselves available. So if I'm not making myself available to sponsor a newcomer, why in the fuck am I coming here, right? I have to make myself available. If I'm not going to meetings, okay, if I'm not doing H&I, if I'm not going to, the speaker last night, 38 years clean or whatever, said he was the hugger at his group. I think that's fucking awesome, right? Because I need to be willing to make the coffee at the meeting, take the trash out the meeting. And I know I have been guilty of this in the past, of saying, I did my time, right? I did my time leading meetings, okay? Let the newer guys do it, right? That's bullshit. I should never tell somebody to do something that I am unwilling to do. And I am not a Nazi sponsor. I've heard speakers talk about how their sponsor had them stand on a corner for 3 days in the rain, or one gal said something about rolling a golf ball down a gutter. That's just fucking abuse, right? That's not sponsorship. That's control freak abuse, okay? I don't do shit like that. I give the message to the guys that I sponsor, this is what I do, this is how I live. And I would like to say that since I've been clean, I've practiced these spiritual principles in all of my affairs. That would be a bold-faced lie. My wife's here. She's trying to keep me honest. She's trying to keep a straight face. I haven't, okay? I've gotten off track on occasion. Usually when that's happened is because I've quit doing some of the things I just talked about. I quit being of service. I quit going to meetings. I went through a period of time, I was clean, 12 years, 30. So I went through a real dark time in my recovery when I had about 12 years. And, I was going to a group, I'd been going there for multiple years, had friends, had guys that I sponsored, had my sponsor, and my sponsor and some of these other guys got into a multi-level marketing thing, right? And they brought it into Narcotics Anonymous, and they were trying to get people, hooked up. I was getting phone calls, your sponsor tried to, get me hooked up in his downlink after a meeting or something. I was like, what the fuck, right? And so I confronted him about it, and we had a falling out, because he became more interested in making money and that than he did actually carrying a message on Narcotics Anonymous. So I went through a real dark, and then several of the guys that I was close to, one of the guys I was in business with at the time, chose to use, right? And I went through a real dark time because all of my support network, my sponsor, the guys that I was close to, some of the guys that I sponsored, they all went out to use between 10 and 13 years. Most of them, many of them, 6, 8 of them. So I get to start thinking, that's my destiny, right? Why am I here? Why am I doing this? They're doing it. And so I went through a period of time where I didn't go to meetings for a while. And we were in the process of building a house. I had a business that was fucking towering inferno, burning down. I was keeping shit from my wife, right, about where I was at financially, trying to finish this house up because I didn't want to, my ego was involved in this house and this business, and I didn't want to have to get naked, so to speak, and be honest about the fact that I'd failed, right? And I struggled with that. And I didn't get to the point where I wanted to use. I'd quit smoking at that time, and I had a guy helping me that had smoked, and he left a pack of cigarettes and a lighter. And I don't remember if I'd been off a year, 2 years, 5 years. It really didn't matter. But I didn't want to use drugs because I knew using was not going to be the answer. I knew that. So I picked up one of those cigarettes and I dry humped it for a while, right? As a good addict would. I didn't want to really smoke because I knew I shouldn't smoke. So I just, sucked on that thing for a little bit. I think I even went so far as lighting it and like doing nose hits on it or something, And, I was really in despair. And then I started contemplating ways that I could off myself, right? So that my family could still get the insurance policy because you commit suicide, they don't want to pay. And it was a really dark time. Hadn't been to a meeting. I went... 7, 8 months without going to a meeting. And the funny thing is we talk about how anybody can carry the message. We, and the guys that I was sponsoring at the time, they quit calling, man. They didn't want to hear my bullshit anymore, right? They didn't want to hear the fact that I wasn't doing this stuff and I was falling into this dark despair. And you talk about how anybody can carry the message. We went to the old group, whatever that used to be called, and Jeff and Terry were celebrating at that meeting. And it was some kind of crappy burrito wrap, something. And my wife and I hadn't been to a meeting in a long time. We hadn't been to an event in a while. And we decided to go to that event. And I remember sitting there, and there was a guy that I used to sponsor years before that was a chronic relapser. He was in and out, in and out, in and out, in and out. And he came up to me at that meeting. I hadn't seen him in a couple of years. He came up to me and said, "Hey, man, it's good to see you." I said, hey, man. He goes, we miss you at the home group. And I was like, what the fuck, right? Why am I not going? Here's this guy that couldn't even stay clean, and he went out and relapsed after that, right? And he's been back. I think he's got 6-8 years now. But I've told him many times that had a profound effect on me, right? Out of the mouths of babes, somebody that couldn't even stay clean carried a message to me to tell me that it was okay for me to come back, even though I hadn't relapsed, right? And I went back and I stayed engaged in this. I probably have more passion for Narcotics Anonymous the last 10, 12 years than as much as I've ever had in my life. And I will sponsor a newcomer. They drive me fucking crazy, right? They drive me crazy. And they don't do what I think they should do, but that's okay. Like you said, it really doesn't matter. It's not my way or the highway. I've never in my life fired a sponsee, right? I've had many guys call me once or twice because I'm a firm believer we're going to talk about the problem once, and then we're going to talk about the solution. We ain't talking about the problem no more, right? The problem may still be there, right? But we're going to talk about the solution. What are you doing to make this problem better? Because I'm not, if you're going to whine to me about your problem, I'm just going to start charging you, okay? Back then, now it's gone up now. It's $85 an hour. Paid up front, right? And I'll watch the Royals game, and you can cry about your problems all you want. And we won't do shit about it. And I'll just say, every once in a while. That's fine if that's what you want to do. I don't sponsor like that, right? But I've never fired a sponsee. I've had plenty of them, like I said, call a couple of times and leave. The only guy I came close to was I had a guy that I sponsored for 8 or 10 years, and he'd get 8 months and use. He'd get 8 months and use. He'd get a year and use. And the last time he used, he called me and he came back and he said, hey, man, I'm ready to get back. And I told him, I said, man, I think you need to find another sponsor. And he said, why? And I said, because one of the main requirements, and this may be a fault of mine, maybe it's not, one of the main requirements of asking somebody to be your sponsor to help you is that they have faith in you, right? And I had lost my faith in him to stay clean. And there's plenty of other guys that he could ask, right? I have to believe in you, right? And you have to believe in me. And it's funny because I get asked periodically. The speaker last night kind of talked. I sponsor guys differently. Some of them, need different things from me. I have a guy that I've sponsored for 10 years that calls me every Wednesday. He's never called me more than once a week. He's the fucking easiest guy to sponsor in the world, right? Worked his steps. He's a good kid. I'm just like, God, why can't there be more than... I know. Sorry, Dwayne. It's not Dwayne either. So, but that's... how much time is it? About 10 minutes? Oh, boy, we can go all kinds of different directions. Coffee's just starting to kick in now. My biggest problem this morning was sitting over there figuring out if I needed to go to the bathroom before I got up here or not. You get old, we have these different kind of problems. I'll get into this other part. So it talks about how there's no such thing as a failed 12-step call. And I will tell you that there is, I've lost many guys that I have attempted to help throughout the time that I've been clean. It's been going on. I remember having a conversation with Dwayne probably 10 years ago, and when somebody that he had been in treatment with or whatever had died, and I said, get used to it, right? It's an unfortunate. I mean, the literature tells us jails, institutions, and death, and then we get all freaked out when somebody dies. It's one of the. I don't want to call it a promise, but it is kind of a promise, right? That this is what's going to happen if you use, right? And it does happen. There's been a few of them that I remember. One particular guy that I wasn't sponsoring him, but a guy that I sponsored was, and he was a young kid. And I got to be honest, his personality and stuff kind of grated on me a little bit, And as we get older, sometimes, I'm just being honest. And so I probably wasn't, I didn't sponsor him, and he never really called me, but I never reached out to him. And, I kind of came from the old school sponsors that never called their sponsees, right? And I went through a period of time with that. What I will say is I won't chase anybody around, okay? But if I've developed a relationship with you over a period of time and I don't hear from you for a while, I will call, right? I will call. I don't think me caring about what's going on with you violates any kind of trust. That is a difference that I've had. There was a time I would never call him, right? Because that's the way my sponsor was. You want what I got, you'll fucking come get it, you know? And I subscribe to that to a certain extent, but I also realize that there are times when I need to reach out and let them know that I still give a shit. Because sometimes somebody gets in that position that I was in, and that call might be everything that changes what's going on with them. Sometimes it doesn't. But this particular kid, I don't know, it stuck with me. Even though I never had a phone conversation with him, I'd see him in meetings every once in a while. He stayed clean for a little while, and then he overdosed and died. And afterwards, I start questioning myself, right, a little bit. Could I have reached out a little bit more? Would it have made a difference? The thing that I always tell guys that I sponsor, I will not take ownership or responsibility for your success at being clean. I won't. I'm just some guy, right? I'm some guy that you happen to pick because nobody else would talk to you or whatever. You like my shoes or whatever. You know, and it worked out. It could have been anybody. But I also will never take responsibility for somebody getting high, right? And I've had guys that you know, I've sponsored that, you know, blame it on me. We didn't work the steps right. Well, it's funny, it worked for me for 36 years, you know. It doesn't have anything to do with that. I don't always think, and I've heard other people, you would hear it in Dwayne's share about, you know, sponsor shopping when you first come in. And I've heard people all the time, I'm just trying to find the right person. You'll never pick somebody if you're doing that, right? Anybody is better than nobody, okay? And we need different things as we get sponsored. When we first come in here, we just need somebody we can relate to, right? I need somebody that I can relate to. And that's why sometimes newer guys that have been clean for a couple of 3 years make great sponsors because they still have that raw edge of what it was like. I had a guy tell me one time after he relapsed that I don't remember what it was like. The fuck I don't, right? I still remember what it was like my last couple weeks using. That doesn't have anything to do with it. I can still relate to it. The reason you used it is because you wanted to, you know? And after, you know, I won't, and the speaker last night talked a little bit about it. I will never be hindered by my disease. I'm not going to blame anything on the fact I'm an addict, right? I take ownership of my life today. So if I'm not living by these spiritual principles, if I'm not being committed to my wife, right? If I'm not being committed to my job, if I'm not being a good parent, if I'm not doing these things, it's not addiction's fault. It's my fault, right? And I need to take ownership of that. And if I'm doing those things, I need to change them. Because if we don't, the 10th step talks about if we don't do this shit, we will back ourselves into a corner that we can't get out of clean. And I know you might not believe how good I can hop and skip, but I've jumped out of that fucking corner more than once, right? After I backed myself, I get my what they call parquet or whatever it is when they do that shit, what them young kids do, right? I've jumped out of that corner many times because I've backed myself into there because of my behavior, right? And I know for a fact that if I don't want to go to that corner, I need to consistently do these things, right? And I can't just be a guy that goes to a convention once a month or shows up at my home group a week before my birthday to put my name on the board and then comes back a week afterwards and never comes back again the rest of the year. I can't carry the message if I'm not fucking here, right? I can't do it. It's impossible for me to do that. I can't do it through, osmosis or anything else. I have to be here and be available. I have to make myself available to those people. And I try to tell guys all the time, we go to our home group and we want to get with everybody that we know and, do our shit and whatever. Find a newcomer at your meeting, right? Go up and be available. Just introduce yourselves. It's hard to come in here. It's hard to come in. In our group over there, it can be hard to come in, because you got some guys that got clean time and we're not talking about, sober and Suboxone and all kinds of shit, and they get intimidated by it, right? But the thing is it's all done with love and caring, And sometimes people are like, I've been told I can be a little harsh, believe it or not. No. But you know what? Sometimes the truth is harsh. That don't make it any less true, right? But you do have to learn how to deliver it. I'm not one to I'm not one to call out people in a meeting unless it goes a certain direction. I don't do that, but I am one to go up to somebody after a meeting and explain to them what we're doing here and what this message is, right? And I don't blame newcomers for not knowing what to do in a meeting. We come out of treatment, they're taking us to AA, CA, GA, SA, whatever, and we come in and we don't know how to act in our Narcotics Anonymous meeting, or we don't know about the literature. That's not their fault, right? It's the fault of addicts that have been clean for a long time that will not stand on anything, right? And we'll come in here and we've been clean for a long time. I know a guy that's been clean 25 years. He might break out and start talking about Scripture in a meeting, right? I do have a problem with that, right? Because they do know better. They just choose to not stand on anything. And I am a firm believer that if you don't stand on the message of Narcotics Anonymous, you're part of the problem. You really are. And we have to learn how to deliver it in a loving and caring manner. That's where I've fallen short sometimes, right? I just admit it. Fallen short sometimes. I am a work in progress. I have gotten better, maybe. The other one's laughing at me that was next door in the big room with all the people, I have gotten some better. But man, I'm glad you guys asked me. It was funny when Mike came down to our we were having an event down at the home group on Saturday, and Mike showed up. I think he's the program chair or whatever, and he walked in and he's like, hey, what's going on? I didn't even know him, and he started asking. He said something about who would make a good speaker at a workshop. So I think we pointed in Tommy's direction first. And then he said, do you know anybody? And then he said Dwayne, and then Dwayne said me, and then we had another guy that was going to come, but he decided that he was taking a break from NA, so he's not here, which was part of the other part. And we kind of had a little falling out over it, which brings me to my last little point. If I came here and got clean, and somebody was here for me, it's my responsibility to stay here and be here for other people, right? I don't get to take a break. I don't get to get mine and then not come back. I don't get to and it's hard, right? Because as we get, hopefully when we get clean, we get our lives back. We get our kids back. We get, a productive life back. We get all of those things. But the book also talks about that we don't change Narcotics Anonymous to fit our lives, right? We change our lives to fit Narcotics Anonymous. And when they hit you with that earlier, you gotta make this the most important thing. People are thinking, well, how am I going to fit all this other shit in? You can do both, right? You can do both. If you've been clean for 20 years, you probably don't need to go to 7 meetings a week, right? You probably need to tend to your life, because most of the guys that I've known that do that aren't tending to their kids. They're not tending to their relationship. They're not tending to their work. And that's fine. They become what we call service junkies or whatever. I have to learn how to do both. And for an addict, that's a balancing act. It's hard, right? Because who wouldn't just want to go into meetings instead of take care of their life? Nobody wants to go to work every day. There's a couple of us in here that it's a big joke because we've lucked out with what we do. And then one that it's not a big joke to her, but I still think it's fun. I can be funny up here. I'll hear about it later. That's our responsibility, And my first sponsor used to call them NA thieves, right? You come in here and thieve some recovery and you don't come back, right? What if there was nobody here when you got here? What if these people didn't do this? And I'm not saying you need to take every service commitment, but I'm saying you need to be visible, right? You need to have a home group. You need to be there. You need to do all of those things. So I had this conversation, and it was really weird because we'd done his fifth step, had this, I even hugged him at the picnic table at the park, right? And we had a great experience, great fifth step. And he told me he was taking a step back from NA. And I said, what does that mean? What does it mean you're going to take a step back? And he's like, well, I've got a lot of other stuff going on. I said, I get it, right? I can still make 1 meeting a week and talk to my sponsor a couple times a week. That's not that big of a commitment, And if I don't do that, soon I'll find myself in that corner. I've watched that so many times. Don't let the life NA gives you take you away from NA. Because you got to remember, your mind by itself is a fucked up place, right? And you didn't get clean. You didn't get clean with the same mind that got you dirty, right? It doesn't work like that. And if I take a step back, all that self-centeredness starts coming in. I have to be here because me being here and being of service and helping others is the only antidote to my self-centeredness. It's the only one. I've yet to find another one. And I've tried it with different things, and it just does not work. Man, I appreciate you guys. Thanks.